Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles.
We are in chapter 7, verse 10. We now have our dialogue between Amaziah and Amos, and this the scholars who deal with this think this could have really happened. In other words, it's not a fictitious story, but it's hard to know. But anyway, it shows, though, the nature of the two people and where they're coming from on this whole discussion. So verse 10. Vayishlach Amaziah Kohen Beit El Yeravam Melech Yisrael Lemor Kashar Alecha Amos B'kerev Beit Yisrael Lo Tuchal Haaretz Lahachil Et Kol Devarav. Okay, so Amaziah sent a message. Amaziah, the priest of Beit El, sent a message to Yeravam, the king of Israel, saying, this guy Amos is plotting against you in the midst of the household of Israel, and the land cannot contain all the things that he is saying. All right? That's what that is saying. So the point here is, if you go back to verse 9, you will see that what Amos had predicted was that the temple would be destroyed, the temples would be destroyed, all the sacred places would be destroyed, and so would the house of Yeravam. Okay, so indeed, he threatened these two key institutions of the country. Okay, so therefore, this being the case, so Amaziah brought this to the attention of the king. So Amaziah appears to be operating as a court priest, and there are other examples of court priests that you may be familiar with. So Yeshayahu was a court priest for King Chizkiyahu. Natan was a court priest for David, and Chilkiyahu was a court priest for Yoshiyahu the king. In other words, all of these high priests had a direct connection with the king and could admonish him, share information, guide, etc. And so Amaziah then plays that role with Yeravam. All right, so now this whole notion of the land not being able to contain lahachil, to contain this. The Hebrew word lahachil is the same root as kalal, meaning as coal, as the word coal. All right, and so it means everything, to contain everything. So if you look at the Hebrew, tuchal lahachil et kol, there's a little wordplay there. Now, whether Amaziah himself spoke that way, or the prophet in his poetic fashion, reworded it, we don't know. But it's just interesting, a little bit of poetry in. So what is this that he is afraid of? That Amos's words, right, what Amos has been preaching, will cause a major problem in the country. That's what that is saying. It can't keep hearing all these words and assuming that nothing is going to happen. So does it mean that the people will rise up and rebel? It doesn't say specifically what it is that Amaziah is worried about, right? Is that what's going to happen? Or does it mean that in some fashion, what Amos is doing is disrupt this tranquil, very quiet, there's Leon, will in some fashion disrupt this lovely situation that the country is in? Because remember, what do we know about the country in 760 BCE? It was relatively at peace. The king had conquered and expanded the boundaries. There was relative peace between Israel and Judah. Judah was a subservient member in the relationship, but they were not fighting against each other. And the country was wealthy, right? It was. And that's part of the problem, according to Amos, because that wealth has been gained at the cost of the poor who had been trodden, on whom the wealthy had trodden and taken advantage of. So anyway, so clearly there's a problem there. And, so it is almost seen as a serious, what shall we say, impactful personality? Or is he seen as a wacko who's running around saying crazy things? And either his personality, his positive and powerful personality, or his craziness is going to do something bad. The second thing to keep in mind is that now the targets, according to chapter 7, verse 9, are very clear, right? The temples and the priests and the royal dynasty, right? And it's very likely that Jeroboam was aware of other prophets who were successful in bringing down other dynasties. Okay, and so let's look at this. The two prophets other than he, whom we know brought down dynasties in one fashion or another, were, interestingly, Eliyahu, and his disciple Elisha. All right, so now you got a Bible handy? Is your Bible available?
Yes.
Yes, because I want you to look in your Bible.
Available.
Huh?
No, I just said always we were looking at the Bible. So
all right.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I want you to look at Malachim Aleph, 1 Kings, chapter 19, verses 15 to 17.
1 Kings, chapter 19. Chapter
19, verses 15 to 17. Okay? And I want you to read it and tell me what you see.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Rabbi, sorry, say it again.
What?
Malachim Aleph.
Malachim Aleph 19, Yud Tet,
Yeah.
15 to 17. Tet Vav to Yud Zayin.
Okay. The measure.
Wait, Barbara, if you're talking, you're muted. I can't hear you.
What chapter? I'm sorry.
Sorry, I muted myself.
19, 1 Kings 19.
19.
But this is Eliyahu talking here?
What?
15 to 17.
This is Eliyahu talking? Is he the prophet we're reading now?
No, God is talking to Eliyahu.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Where is Aram, out of curiosity?
The what?
Where Hazael is being appointed as king of Aram. Where is Aram?
The Arameans.
19.
But it's part of what became Babylonia.
Okay.
Kings 15 to 17.
Okay, I'm on 19, which?
Verses 15 to 17.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the Lord said to him, go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus, and you shall come and anoint Hazael.
Read it to yourself. Read it 15 through 17.
Okay. Oh, and Yehu, the son of Nimshi, you shall anoint king over Israel, and Elisha.
Don't read it out loud. Wait, Leon, other people are reading quietly, okay?
Oh, sorry. I thought you wanted me to read that.
No. Everybody's reading to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good.
So Hazael is the king who will move against Achav and ultimately bring an end to that dynasty.
Mm-hmm.
And then Elisha, Elisha, his assistant, and then, all right, so now 2 Kings, I'll just tell you about it because this is a long piece. In 2 Kings 9, 1 to 13, Elisha is now the priest, okay? And, Elisha is the prophet, and his disciple appoints Yehu as king. Yehu kills Achav's son Yoram and establishes the Yehu dynasty, all right, of which Yeravam II's son was the last king. So in other words, Yeravam knows that Elijah to Elisha and Elisha's assist brought down Achav's dynasty, and that now it would appear that Amos is trying to bring down his dynasty. Now he doesn't. Yeravam II dies a natural death, but the fact is his son Zechariah was assassinated. So the point here is that if you recall, well, here you'll see in a moment how Amaziah expresses this, but that's what we already saw in verse 9, right, that Amos had predicted. That's what he had predicted. Okay, all right, is all this clear so far? So, but again, so my whole point is Yeravam would be very much aware of how prophets working, depending upon how your faith goes, working with the power of God, bring down dynasty. Okay? All right, now, okay, Tybal.
My Hebrew is not like other Hebrew, so as in not good enough. But when I'm looking at the name Hazael, clearly the El is God. But is Haza like strength, like Chazah?
No. Chazah is remember, Amos was called and will soon be called again a chozeh, a seer. So Hazael is presumably based on a Semitic word that similarly means El Chazah. El, the god El, saw me, sees me, keeps his eye on me. Or I have been touched by the visions of El, something like that.
So the text is telling us good things.
El is not a Jew, an Israelite.
No, I get it, but he's still got a name that means something.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
But remember, El was a major deity in that part of the world, a pagan deity, not Hashem. El was the father of Baal. So this guy,
I was thinking it was like the El and Michael and Gabriel and.
Well, no, it is, except our people did the same thing. They just they took the name El, Todala El, right? Don't we use that term to this day? Todala El, thanks be to God, right? El na rafa na la, what Moses said to cure his sister. El, he calls God El. So El is a carryover from paganism that the Israelites just morphed into just meaning deity. It's sort of a generic word for the deity. May the deity, may the God, as opposed to Elohim, which is Eloah and El are linked, those two words. And Elohim, is a plural form of all that. And I'm of the school of thought that says Elohim means all of the powers in the universe that people can ascribe to gods are within Elohim, the one God. So that one God is Elohim. Any God power you can think of doesn't come from a pagan god, him, this one, that one, him, he, she, it, whatever. No, they all come from Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. So that's Elohim. All right, so Chazael is a good pagan name. He is a worshiper of the god El. All right? Okay, so that's what this is. Now, we got to look now at the next verse in Amos, right? Okay, because, this is getting close to home. So now what the Amaziah is now continuing his report to his king. Verse 11. Kicho amar Amos, Bacherev Yamut Yeravam, v'Yisrael galo yigle me'al admato. This is what Amos says, said Amaziah. Yeravam will die by the sword, and Israel will be very indeed exiled from its land. Okay? So now, this is Amaziah, his version of what Amos said. And yes, Amos said the people would be exiled. The Amos did not say, however, that Yeravam would die by the sword. What Amaziah here is doing is sort of personalizing it, right? Because it doesn't, in other words, Amos did not say that whether or not, he didn't say Yeravam's not going to die, but his dynasty is going to end. All he said was, Amos said, the house of Yeravam will be destroyed, okay? So Amaziah is now personalizing it by saying that Amaziah will die by this, so that Jeroboam himself will, that's his midrash on what Amos said. He's interpreting it, and in so doing, making the king even more anxious, right? Because it sounds like Amos is out to get him personally, okay? So in the end, by the way, just let me finish the thought. In the end, Amos is the one who got it right? The people were exiled. Yeravam wasn't killed. He died a natural death. but his son was killed by a Meshuggah with a sword. And the guy who killed him was, sort of a fly-by-night single person, not a person who had a profound, he had a profound impact on history in the sense that he killed the last person to take, etc. All right. Okay, so first Leon, then Barbara.
I just want to point out that we don't know everything that Amos said. He may have actually said the second one as well.
It could be, but we have to live with what we've got.
Yeah.
So we can't say anything's possible because we all know all the biblical books at certain points were probably looked over, modified in certain ways, but we don't know how. So we can't be sure. But in the meantime, it's clear that yes, but Amos got it right. For all we know, Amos got it right.
Yeah.
Okay, Barbara.
Well, I don't quite understand your translation because the way I translate it is, thus said Amos, by the sword or with the sword, Yeravam will die.
That's what I said.
So where are you saying that it's the house of Yeravam?
No. Look at chapter 7, verse 9.
Right.
It's 9 in chapter 7.
Oh, okay. So so you're going
Amos
back.
says the house.
That Yeravam will die by the sword or by the Cherav.
That's in verse 11.
Yeah.
Both Rashi and Steinsaltz agree with that interpretation, that it was on the house, not on the person.
Yeah, well, that's what it says.
Okay, that's what he's saying. And I couldn't figure it out because I'm just reading.
Yeah, all right. I understand. Yeah. All right. So, yeah. So with all of this, we don't know what Amatzia really said in response, right? I'm sorry, Yeravam.
No.
We don't know how Yeravam responded.
Yeravam.
Amatzia now goes back to Amos. Now we're in verse 12. And he tells Amos, okay, Vayomer Amatzia al Amos, Chozeh, lech brach lecha el Eretz Yehuda, ve'echol sham lechem, ve'sham tinave. Very significant word. So first of all, he calls Amos a Chozeh, all right, a seer. Now, that is not a derogatory term because if you recall at the very beginning of the book, the editor of the book who wrote the beginning introductory line calls Amos a Chozeh. It's another word for a prophet. It means from the Hebrew word Chet Zayin Hey, which means to see. He's a seer, all right? So when using the term Chozeh, it's not derogatory, it's a title. Okay, so he says Chozeh, Lech brach lecha el Eretz Yehuda. Sounds interesting. What does it remind you of? Brach lecha.
Lech lecha, kind of the same rhythm.
Where have you heard it before?
Well, God said to Abraham, Lech lecha.
Lech lecha, right? Exactly. Yes. Right. Twice he says it to Abraham.
Right.
Go to the land when he wants me to go with the mountain. Kachna bincha yichidcha asher havta belech lecha, and go and take yourself. Right. So it means a serious leaving. Right. And the word brach, of course, livroach means to do what?
To flee.
To flee, and it implies
that he's in danger.
Yes.
Or people don't want him around.
Yes. Right. So, I'm not just saying that to him. Is he saying, listen, I really am worried about you. Listen to me. Run. Get the H out of here. It's not good for you to stay here. Leave.
It may not be good for him. It may not be good for the kingdom.
Well, if he stays.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. No, but the point is, I'm not sure I don't think Amatzia really cares whether Amos lives or dies.
No, that's exactly.
He's telling him, get out of here you better get out of here as fast as you can.
Yeah.
It's that type of thing,
Get out of town.
Get out of town or you're going to get it.
Yeah.
Somebody, if we don't do it, somebody else is going to do it.
Yeah.
Get out of here, and go to Judah. Let's go back where you belong.
Can we say he 86'd him?
What? Yeah, right. Go back to where you belong, right? Now, interesting. Ve'echol sham lechem, sham tinaveh, and eat there. There you should eat your food, and there you should prophesy. What's the connection between the food and the prophecy? What's this thing with food? Just say v'sham tinaveh. Leon?
Well, I think Rashi's got it right. Lashon bizayon. In other words, you're doing it for pay, so go to where your pay matters.
Well, that's the point. No, you hit it. What kind of a prophet is he?
He's a prophet for pay.
Yeah, in other words, you'll see in a minute, this is one of those guys. Amatzia is talking to him as if he's one of these professional prophets who basically could become your personal oracle, right? And you go from time to time, you give him a few bucks, and he tells you what's going to happen and what you want to hear, basically. All right, that's one possibility. And I want to remind you, we know of instances where people are running around like wackos or really, strange people, and they're prophesying. Okay, one is after
Rasha.
It's in Devarim. Bamidbar.
Bamidbar, yeah.
Chapter 11, where Moses says, "Kill me, I can't take it anymore." And God says, okay, choose 6 men from each tribe, and I will not diminish, but I will extract from your prophetic power some prophetic power and share it with them, right? And they will help you. It says, fine, right? And, 70 of them, and then it says that in 70 of them, the Shivim Zakenim, one more time, different version, right? But 2 of them, Eldad and Medad, were doing the same thing like everybody else. And what were they doing? Mitnab'im. They were prophesying, whatever that means. It was a group. There are a whole bunch of them, right? So they're technically Nevi'im. Are they talking to God the way Moses is? Of course not. Now, maybe they were seen as, we don't know what that meant. We also know that Saul, for a while, ran around with a group called Bnei HaNevi'im. I think we talked about this at the beginning of the book. It means the sons of prophets, but it means it was a group of prophets. So it was these, second tier, third tier prophets who would do what you wanted them to do. Now, the court prophets will probably drawn from that group. The courts would have a prophet, and Jeremiah alludes to that. They had prophets, and they would basically tell the king what they thought the king needed to know. And, say, yes, God has spoken to me. And he says, God loves you. You're doing it. King, keep skimming the income tax. Go ahead. It's good. It's good. Whatever. Okay, Leon.
Well, let's not be too ungentle about these people. We know of a prophet that wasn't even Jewish who was a true prophet. Matogu olecha Yaakov.
Yeah, of course, sure. Bilam. Yeah, sure.
Right. So these prophets could actually, and we know Prophet Nathan with David.
Yeah, but he was
a court prophet.
Yes.
Yet
he wasn't a yes man.
Was not a yes man.
No,
he was a real prophet.
So what I'm saying is, you have prophets, even some for pay, that tried to say yes, but were real prophets.
Yeah.
Others who, even though they were paid to be the prophet of the court, still acted in accordance to God, not the king.
Correct. Well, that's right. Now, I said that before. These prophets, there were prophets and prophets, right? There were prophets who basically said what the king wanted, okay? And then there were prophets who had chutzpah to tell the king, you just screwed up, okay? And that, in a sense, is what Amos is playing the role. I mean, he didn't go to the king himself, right? So in that sense, he never was a court prophet. He never was, didn't set foot in the court. But the point is, he was talking about it, and he was playing the role of a severe critic of it. And in that respect, Hizkiyahu really worked very closely with Yeshayahu. Okay, they were all ideologically on the same plane. Okay, and of course Natan is the one who really laid it on to David for his rape, right? And because he basically murdered
the murderer of
his son, Bathsheba's son, husband.
Uriah
the Hittite.
Oh yeah,
Uriah Hittite, whom he sent to the front lines to get killed. Yeah. Anyhow, so and what Natan told him is exactly what happened in his life. it was bad. Remember his son Avshalom revolted, and exactly what he said would happen happened. He took all of his midwives, took them up on the roof, and he had sexual intercourse in public to show, not midwife, his harem.
Harem, yeah.
Concubines, right?
Huh?
Concubines.
Concubines, yeah. But
Harem, either way.
let's call a spade here. It was a harem, anyhow. But so I mean, anyway, so those are the we could say from the perspective of the Bible, the effective prophet. The other ones were, called, the title was sort of shallow. And I will venture to say you can even see different gradations, but they were people believed in these powers. And, there are people today running around who claim to be prophets, and there are people who want to hear them.
The cult leaders, yeah.
Yes, cult leaders definitely play that role, sure.
And we have, of course, cult leaders that become religions.
That become
Muhammad, Jesus, some of them Jewish.
Yeah. Well, that was due to Paul, but we don't want to get into that whole thing.
All right. So, yeah. Anyway, so he tells him to go. But the point is, here what's interesting is that you can see the reference here to eat your bread, means that you'll get your bread by prophesying over there, like as a professional one. That's exactly what, the way Leon put it was absolutely correct. Yeah. All right. So let's see what my notes say. Right. Okay. Now, he's not finished yet. So Amaziah continues. Uvetel lo tosif od lihinabe. Do not prophesy anymore in Bethel. Ki mikdash melechu. Because it is a royal sanctuary, holy place. Uvet mamlachahu. And it's a house of the monarchy, the royal palace. Okay. What does this tell you about Amaziah?
Be like a vizier, someone who's close to the king.
Right. What is missing in these descriptions? These descriptions of the temple?
That it's God's place, not
bingo.
Place.
Right. Whose temple is it? Should it be God's temple? Right. But no, it's a royal temple. That's what he says.
Yeah, Biglash Melech.
Right. Yeah.
But Rabbi, isn't it also missing that Amaziah was saying he's saying he doesn't say in God's telling me to tell you it's God.
Right. God doesn't come to his lips at all.
Yeah, but to me that's also missing. Because then it just looks like effrontery. That who is this guy saying to whatever? Without giving the justification for the authority to say it. I mean, setting aside whether he's right or wrong,
Well, I don't understand. Repeat what you just said.
Amaziah is not saying God came to me, whatever God came to me.
No, Amaziah does not speak for God, no.
Yeah, but then to say the kinds of things he's saying, to me, he should be saying first that he speaks for God, whoever his notion of God is, the pagan or whatever.
Yeah, of course, but he's doing it from the perspective of a politician. He's not doing it from first of all, you don't get a sense here that the people should survive. Where does he say that? He doesn't, right? He just says that this is going to be too much for the people. What that means is not clear. It seems to me that it means is that the people, at a certain point, something's going to break. It doesn't mean that the people can't bear that. Most of the people don't know what he's saying, and the people who do hear him, that's the point. Amaziah is afraid that Amos is going to turn the people either turn them against the king and the monarchy and himself, or cause them to have real concerns about the future in spite of the good times. Because Amos is saying the good times is not as good as you think it is. And if he's reminding the poorer classes, you're not getting your cut of the pie, then they're going to, they might rebel, they might riot, I don't know. But the point is, it's not good. No good is going to come from it. And he is not saying it from the perspective of really the well-being of the people. It's all from the context of what you see here. And this last sentence, just to me at least, this is a priest who is more of a politician than a priest. And I see your hand, Barbara. And there were priests who were like this. I mean, if you look in the New Testament and look at the Caiaphas, the high priest, this guy's a politician more than he is a priest. And you get the sense from Josephus, a lot of the priests became politicians. From 200, remember that after the return from the exile, after the generation of Ezra, we don't have any named people. There are, the names that we hear are priests. The people who are doing things, and there are not many, we don't have many recorded, when they are priests, they are sought out from a political perspective. The only priest that we know of, maybe him being a priest, was Shimon HaTzadik, mentioned in Pirkei Avot, who lived around 200, and that may refer to Simon, the high priest, okay, who in other traditions is seen as a righteous priest. But other than that, look what happened to the Hashmon, to Antiochus, right, and his crew. And then later on, look what happened to the Maccabees. I mean, they were priests, but they were generals of war, and there was a lot of deaths, knives in the back, not just figuratively, that went on in that family. It was politicized. It was corrupted for all the stuff that happened. So
was also Greek
corrupt, politically oriented priests are nothing new. And look at the papacy, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, 16th century had a whole bunch of them. The big bucks, right? Yeah. Anyway.
And Avignon wanted.
So anyhow, this is what we're dealing with. All right. So now,
Joel, just a sec, please.
Yeah.
It seems to me like Amaziah is very jealous of Amos and wants to get rid of him because he's scared that Amos could move into his place.
I don't think Amos was not a priest.
I know, but I think he was scared of what Amos could say. I don't know, I may be wrong. That's just the way I kind of read it.
Now, it could be, but the point is he speaks, though, from the perspective also, remember, of the whole establishment. So I don't think he's afraid that the whole establishment is going to be knocked out.
Right.
And Amos would come forward, as some kind of another leader. That's a possibility. It doesn't say that.
No, it doesn't say it, but yet, I mean, if I'm the priest and I'm talking to Jeroboam, and as somebody else that people might listen to is down there.
Yes.
I'd be kind of scared that my position with Jeroboam.
Yeah, of course. It may be, but it's possible. But the point is, Jeroboam. I mean, Amaziah is basically on the same page as Jeroboam, right? And he's trying to emphasize that Amos is nowhere near them.
Right. I agree with that.
Yeah, and so it's hard to know, what other motives. I mean, if you're saying he wants to keep the establishment established, absolutely, yes. I mean, I think that is absolutely correct. All right, so now we have Amos's famous response, verse 14. Vayan Amos vayomer el Amaziah. Lo navi anochi lo ben navi anochi, ki boker anochi uvoles shikmim. Now, there are two different opinions. What does it mean, lo navi anochi? Everybody agrees that lo ben navi means I'm not a professional prophet.
Yeah.
I don't use my prophet reputation to feed my mouth because I herd cattle, I raise cattle, and I'm a tender of sycamore fruits or figs. Okay, so I mean the man had a job. He worked and maybe had property.
Yeah,
So in fact, we're going to learn in the next. He's also it says, one second. In verse 15, just to jump ahead for a second. So God, he had sheep also. So this guy was a herder, and maybe a herder or a breeder of four-legged kosher animals. And you got to keep in mind, if you have cattle, if you're a breeder of cattle, you either are getting a good salary or you're wealthy or reasonably wealthy, because cattle are big, expensive animals and they eat a lot at one time, and you need to have a pasture for them to eat, because unlike sheep and goats, you can't take them up in the mountains so the sheep, the little shepselach, can eat around the stones and clean the ground down to the earth, right? Cattle have different requirements. And similarly, if you've got a grove of trees and figs, fancy schmancy one, you're not poor. So, I mean, there's a big argument, by the way, among scholars as to whether or not Amos was poor, because obviously he's always talking about the poor people. But when you read something like this, and this is from Amos's own mouth, you get the impression this is not a poor person. I'm not saying he's filthy rich, but he's not a poor person.
Well, he doesn't depend on the king or the establishment to give his
no
bread.
Exactly. Right, he takes care of himself. Clearly, if he is, and he's also saying, he's going to say this in a minute. I'm doing this, I'm losing money here, right? As long as I stay here, and you would have thought if he's getting out quickly, he's saying, okay, great, thanks, I'll go. I can get back to work, bye. But you still got another 2 chapters of him to go through. So we don't know if he left or not, but he continued to prophesy. And one has to assume he probably did it there, because in Judah, Judah was part of the conspiracy indirectly, because they worked with the government of Israel. The 2 governments, right? Israel had suppressed Judah. They were a sort of puppet government that went along with him, quasi-independent, but nonetheless working together. Okay, kind of a working agreement with Israel on top. So anyway, let's get back to this though. So he's not a Ben Navi. He's not a professional prophet. He works for his money. All right, we've established it. How do you read the first 3 words? He says, Lo Navi Anochi v'lo Ben Navi. So that could mean I'm not an independent professional or a group profession, right?
Well, usually in those days, and not that far ago, if you're, especially in Europe, if you were a cobbler, your father was a cobbler and your grandfather was a cobbler, and you took on that. So doesn't come from a line of.
Yeah, except, right. But the fact is, though, that we know from its use in the Bible, doesn't necessarily mean a son. All right, and when you're talking about professions, things that people do for a living, okay, I'm just saying that because B'nai Nevi'im, it's a plural, and you have a bunch of kids who themselves are all children of prophets. No, it means a group, right? They're part of the same club. That's what it means, and that's what he's talking about here. So you could be an independent, right, by yourself professional prophet, which is probably what Amatzia is assuming. Or you could be a group prophet, somebody who was trained by a Rebbe prophet, and the other guys went out and whatever they did, okay? That's one way. My friend Zevit, Sioni Zevit, a long time ago, wrote a paper when he said, no, it's being misread. You have to put a period after the word lo. Look at the Hebrew. Vayomer, Vaya'an Amos, Vayomer El Amatzia. Lo, Navi Anochi, below Ben Navi. No, I am a real prophet, not a professional prophet. Because, look at verse 15. Vayikacheni Adonai ma'acharei hatzon. God took me away from the sheep. Vayomer Elai Adonai, lech hinavei el ami Yisrael. Go and prophesy to my people. God is the one who did this. So I am that kind of a prophet, a true prophet, a prophet to God. So Zevit looks at that verse 15 in conjunction with 14, and he's saying, when I say Navi, this is what I mean by a Navi. And clearly that is consistent with the entire book, because everything he says in the name of Hashem, as do all the prophets. Right? All the biblical prophets, if you read them closely, they do not say Verily I say unto you, okay? And I can tell you when I teach either mixed Jewish Christian groups or Christian groups, I make a point of that Jesus, who says throughout his books, I say to you, those words totally remove him from the category of a prophet from the Hebrew biblical tradition. No prophet said that. Every prophet says speaks in the name of God. That was one of the badges of a true prophet. I mean, that's how the Bible understands it. Okay? Now, again, all these other prophets we don't hear about that are mentioned just in passing without names or names, but they just come and go, right? And we don't know if they're talking for God, themselves, or whatever. I can't speak to that. But what he is saying here is, what you're seeing me do is not done by my choice, okay? And we have a line now that reminds us of something we have heard before, okay? Aryeh sha'ag, mi lo yira, Adonai Elohim diber, mi lo yinabe. A lion has roared, who can but fear? A lion roars, you are afraid. Adonai Elohim diber, God speaks, who can help but prophesy, okay? And he's going to go on, but you get the point. And he's seeing this as a real, it's something that Amatzia has difficulty digesting. He's repeating it over and over again. Yeah, Barbara.
I think that Rashi's comment is kind of interesting to that sentence 14. He says, I'm not one of your false prophets who take pay for prophesizing, which is implying that he is a real prophet.
Yes.
Because a real prophet does it because God makes him do it.
Well, that's right. So right. So he's saying if that's correct. Rashi's right. Whether you say Navi from Amatzia's perspective, right? He's basically, right. Rashi is saying that Amos was not a Navi the way Amatzia defines a Navi.
Yeah, right. Correct.
But individually or group-wise, he's not.
Yeah. And then I think it's kind of interesting because Rashi then goes on and says, I did not need all this. I never behaved in that manner, for I am wealthy and an owner of cattle and profit and property.
Right. So that's right. Rashi says.
Rashi is agreeing with it. Yes,
yeah, exactly. Saying, I'm not a poor guy. I've worked myself. I know I'm a man of means.
Right.
And that's my job. I do my job, and I'm successful because I'm a good professional in my field. But I'm not a prophet. God made me one, and I cannot say no to God. How can you say no to God? It's impossible. That's what he's saying. And so now he's continuing. He's really moving on this. I mean, you can see he's really exercised about this. So verse 16, Ve'ata shma devar Adonai. So now I want you to hear the word of God. It's coming out of my mouth, but you're going to hear it. This is the word of God. Ata amer lo tenaveh al Yisrael, ve'lo tatif al Beit Yitzchak. So you say, don't prophesy on Israel, and don't, the same word, latif means to drip. It means, to sprinkle words on top of Israel, on top of the house of Isaac. We saw Beit Yitzchak before. We talked about that. We don't know if it's a derogatory term or just a matter of pronunciation. Remember, Tybal will tell you. Tybal, how many times does that appear in the Bible?
Wait, which thing? How many times?
Yitzchak. It's in your notes.
Oh, it's in my notes. Hold on.
Never mind. 4 times. Okay.
Oh, yeah, it is. Right. The other spelling of it.
Yitzchak, yes, with the sub.
Yes.
All right. So, I mean, again, you can see this is one of those prophetic parallelisms. Poetic parallelisms. He's already doing it. Lo tinaveh Yisrael, v'lo tatif al Beit Yitzchak. And, it's an A-B structure. Tinaveh, tatif, Yisrael, Yitzchak. Okay. A little mini poem, he's saying, this is what you're telling me, right? Okay. That's what you're telling me. But now, verse 17, Lachen, Ko Amar Adonai. Therefore, because you've said this, because you have talked this way, because Lachen is a connection to what came before. It keeps in mind something that preceded it as a Hebrew word, right? Therefore, and so, this is what God said. Listen to this. Ishtecha ba'ir tizneh, uvanecha ubnotecha, becherev yipolu, be'admatcha, ba'chevel tichulak. You hear that? Chevel tichulak, be'ata al adama titameh, tamut, tamut, ata al adama, tameh, tamut, v'Yisrael galo yigleh. Me'al admato. You hear the word plays, right? The word, a lot of chetz, cherev, chevel, chulak, adama with an aleph, tmeah with an aleph, tmeah, tamut, okay, techalek. I mean, these letters are being used, as in clusters for emphatic purposes. But now let's see what he's saying. This is horrible. And there's a kind of a little mini structure in here in terms of the ideas. Okay? Ishtecha ba'ir tizneh. Your wife in the city will be a prostitute. What's that about? What does that mean? Barbara, I can't,
Well, family will be brought down low, obviously.
Yeah, but doing what? In a sense, what?
She's selling herself.
Yeah, she's selling herself as a whore.
Right. She's being brought down low.
Right. And well, I see your hand, Tybal, just a second. And who knows about this? Her husband, right? I mean, the implication here is you're going to see your wife become a prostitute. How is that going to make you feel? Or if you don't see it with your own eyes, you're going to find out about it because you are who you are. And then, let me just, all right, go ahead quickly. Yes.
Oh, no, to me, this isn't the worst punishment because it's not, in fact, happening to him. It's just happening to his pride.
Wait a second. Hold on.
Except, right, I know I see at the end. That so he's going to die, big deal, but it doesn't say you're going to be the prostitute, you're going to be the slave.
But look at the next one. Uvanecha uvnochecha b'cherev yipolu. Your children are going to die by the sword.
Yeah, but did the girls also fight?
No, they're not going to be fighting. Who says they're fighting? They're being grabbed by whomever. The enemy is coming. This is what's going to happen when the enemy comes. He's already spoken about the enemy coming, right? He didn't name it earlier, right? The enemy is going to be here. Never mentions the name, but he alludes to a great power that is in the offing, right? We talked about this. It's clear that he's aware of the Assyrians who are not yet knocking at the door, but they're moving continuously south and west, and eventually they're going to bump into Eretz Yisrael. Okay, so the point is, this is what's good. So the sword is going to be in the hand of the enemy. All right, because look at what's the end result. The people are going to be driven out. It's the enemy that's going to drive them out, but they're going to do all this in the meantime. Your land will be divided up with ropes. In other words, they'll mark off areas, blocks of the land, presumably. He had a lot of land. By the way, that's very interesting. What was his job?
He was a priest.
Are priests supposed to own land?
No.
Was für a Kain ist das hat azoi a stickel adoma? What? What the heck's he doing? No. And it's such a big piece of land that it's going to be broken up for others.
Well, the whole land will be broken up.
The land, it'll be marked off with with ropes, right? Each a plot. These are all the different plots of land. I don't know how many. We don't know how big it was, but it's not little tiny boxes. Imagine. The point is, he owns land. But you see what this means. His wife, he's going to see his wife, his children, his land, step by step, are being taken away from him. These are his properties, right? These are his household, the center of his life. To heck with the temple. Right, we already knew that the temple is going to be destroyed, but look what's going to happen. This is really talking about Amaziah. Amos is saying this to Amaziah about Amaziah. This is your fate, Bubby, and it sounds like he's right there. He says, "Ata Shema Devar Adonai." Right now, you say, "Don't do this." He's talking to him face to face. And then he says, and you are going to die in an impure land. And what's the irony there?
Hmm.
What is he?
He's a priest, and he's going to
And what is the priest supposed to stay away from?
Dead.
impurity.
Impurity.
Yeah.
The May is impure.
Exactly. The irony. He's going to die in a land that's filled with impurity.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final step, why do we know this? Because Israel is going to be sent out from its land, right? Your land's going to be cut up. You're going to die in an impure land. And the people are going to be exiled to that impure land. Is gone.
Please.
Actually, the translation of just exiled is kind of weak, because galo yigle.
Yeah, well, right, exactly.
Will surely be exiled.
Exactly, you're right. Yes, exactly, right. So this is what lies before him. And by the way, this is a very, as you can see, it's a structured thing. I'm not sure exactly what defined the order between wife, children, and land. I mean, unless, I don't know. Normally you would think children would come first as the most horrific thing. But again, if you're saying, in terms of with whom have you spent the most, let's say, the biggest part of your life. And by the way, I mean, honestly, it's really interesting, because I was talking about this with some people at Dvora's funeral the other, about with the kids. That's what it was. When we cut Kriya, I told them, you are the children. You have the greatest debt to your parent, because your parents gave you life. And that's why your mourning period is much longer than that of a spouse. Okay. But the irony of the whole thing is, on the one hand, it's a great shock, and that's what's implicit here, for a parent to see their child die. That's the worst thing. It's absolutely the worst thing. But on the other hand, from a whole different perspective, if you're married for a long time, when your spouse leaves you, it's tragic. Half of you is gone, and I can say this in, this reality. And very often I've had spouses who have a sense of tradition who would come to me, because, spouses are only supposed to mourn for 1 month. Then it's over. The assumption being, go and take another wife, because you got to have children. Well, life is different today. The Torah was not written for people who are married 40, 50, 60 years, right?
Well, you're not supposed to be alone.
Well, right, sure, of course not. It's not a good thing. But the point is, though, that these people would come to me and say, can I say Kaddish longer than a month? Because I don't think a month is going to be enough time for me to work this out, and it's a valid question. I always say, sure, until you feel you're done. Just don't get hung up on your grief, God forbid. But, if that's going to provide you with strength and comfort, allow you to move out of your grief, God bless, So that the emotions associated with this, so I'm not sure, it may be, I see your hand type, just a second. I don't know if there's any real logic to the order, but it's clear that 1, 2, and 3 are the 3 basic elements of a person's household, right? Your wife, speaking from the man's side, your wife, your children, your property. That's your household. That's the first to go. Then you go. And the point is, you get to see your house, your wife, and your children taken away. That's an even more horrific. Better you take me first, so I don't have to see that. You hear that all the time, in the movies or whatever. Take me first. I don't want to see my children die. I don't want to see them. No, you get to see all the bad stuff, and then you go. And you're going to die in a foreign land. You, Mr. Holy Priest. Whew, it's horrible. He's really laying it into him, isn't he? And in the end, the people. So ends chapter 7. And indeed, we'll stop now.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.